everyone. The upcoming video for Phylacter Friday, I thought I was on the screen. I sat there, had all the actions, the motions, showing you things, and in editing, I saw that I wasn't there. So forgive me for that, but I hope you enjoy the Parliamentary Power Hour. It's about 30 minutes long, so it's not a whole hour, so it doesn't take too much time. But if you do the pauses and the internal reflections that I have for you, it should take you about 45 minutes. So hope you enjoy the video, and I hope to see you next week at our next session. We'll be back to about 5, no more than 10 minutes. And if you have some time, go ahead and come on over to the office hours if you got some questions. And this is January 23rd when this is posted, so it'll be at 7 p.m. on Google Meets. You can get that from the calendar on my website, or you can also get it directly on my Instagram page. The link is posted there. Hope to see you soon. Hello, Soars and Amici and Zeta Mount Network, and welcome to Phylacter Friday. This session is our Parliamentary Power Hour. It's a practical session designed to strengthen your confidence in Robert's Rules of Order, elevate your chapter governance, and prepare you for leadership at every level of Zeta. I'm truly excited to bring this session as part of our organizational commitment to stronger governance, smoother meetings, and more confident officers. Whether you're seasoned or just getting started, the main goal is to give you tools so you can use them at your next meeting. So our finer pearls of governance, we've already talked about principles, we've talked about engagement. Pretty soon we'll talk about accountability, respect, leadership, and sisterhood. In between every two pearls, we'll have a little bit longer sessions. So we've already done our principles and our engagement, and we are here in week 4. So we've been here almost 30 days. Hopefully you've been following along. We're going to talk about our Parliamentary Power Hour. So we're building practical skills. I'm just going to break things down to the core parliamentary concepts. And these won't be very in detail. It's just something so you hear terminology to kind of get you started. So let's start with the truth. Every chapter is only as strong as the way it conducts its business. So we're going to get through a couple of points tonight. We're going to talk about how motions actually work, how to speak more confident during meetings. Hopefully you're going to know your rights as a member, the importance of what the presiding officer must do, how do you protect your chapter from procedural mistakes, and to keep your meetings organized, efficient, and fair for everyone. So exactly what is parliamentary procedure? We don't want our meetings to drag on and on. You look at your watch, it is 2 hours later. And sometimes debate gets heated, people feel unheard. That's not a personality issue, that is a procedure issue. Good parliamentary procedure takes practice, it makes participation fair, and allows everyone's voice to be respected while still protecting time and business. So if you use parliamentary procedure, it leads to better order, it leads to clarity, it leads to respect, it leads to productivity, and it leads to unity. Everybody's on the same page. We are ready to get the business done. And more so, we can get the business done so we can get out to serve our communities. So what are the rights of members? Or what is your right every meeting that you go to? A well-run meeting protects all of these rights listed here. So you have the right to be informed, the right to speak, the right to vote, the right to make motions, to appeal procedural decisions, and the right to ask questions of procedure. But you also have a responsibility as a member. The biggest thing, right to be informed, is did you review the information before you came to the meeting? Did you ask some questions to make sure you're clear of what's happening at the meeting? But by the time you leave the meeting, every member should leave feeling heard, respected, and clear on what has happened. And make sure they're confident in all the decisions made. So it is a two-way street. You have rights, but you also have a responsibility. So important terms that you may hear, especially if it's your first meeting and you walk in and you're like, what's happening? They start throwing around these different terms. You hear the chair first thing before they start the meeting, they may say, okay, quorum is set. And you're like, what is quorum? So quorum is a minimum number needed to conduct business. It's usually in your bylaws. You should say, well, to conduct business, we need 20 people. Or it might be a percentage, like 67% of the membership should be there, but that's something you put in your bylaws. You might hear the agenda, which is just the orders of the day. If you go to church, that's usually what they put in the church bulletin. They make sure from the beginning, hey, the call to worship. Well, you have a call to business to order. So it's just your agenda, your orders, how business is going to make it from A to B. The minutes, it records the action, not every word that was said in a meeting. So that's usually done by the secretary. Motions, and we'll talk very little bit about motions here in this session, create items for discussion. And amendments is changing or clarifying main motions. Now, you might hear amendments to bylaws. That's a little bit different. But in our sense, right here in a meeting that you have each month, amendments are to change or clarify main motions. So a meeting structure at a glance. So usually this is something that the chair and hopefully the secretary have worked out together, and also consulting the parliamentarian. It's usually the call of order. You have a brief meditation, roll call that can be out loud, read by the secretary by his name, or it can be done on paper. Reading or approval of the minutes. And if you send the minutes out prior, you don't have to read them all. Just make sure if there's any corrections. Next, you have your reports of both officers and committees. And then you mention unfinished business, which is business you didn't get to at your previous meeting. New business, any announcements, and then you adjourn the meeting. You would hope that getting from call to order to adjournment takes you no more than an hour for a meeting, close to maybe an hour 15. But if you start taking a little longer, you may want to look, are we really getting business done with a lot of different debates, or are we doing more than we should? So make sure you have a meeting structure at a glance, or a meeting structure to get your meeting started. So let's look at a big foundation of every meeting, which are motions, which motions are the heart of all parliamentary action. Without a motion, you can't do anything. So a main motion introduces new business. It always begins with, I move that. So you stand up and you want to have something talked about before the assembly or before the body. You say, Madam Chair, I move that. Those are the terminology you should use. Looking to discuss business. I move that. So a few key rules about motions. They must be clear. They require a second. Once the motion has been stated by the chair, it belongs to the body. So just because you stood up and you said, I move that we change the color from white to purple, and then the chair, and you got a second and the chair states it, it's no longer your motion. It belongs to the body. Once it's stated by the chair, debate happens before voting. And if there's any amendments, those must be voted on before returning to the main motion. Now, this session is very brief, so you can understand what may happen in a meeting. I'll talk about a little bit later if you want some more in-depth tutorials on how to do motions. That will come up a little later. So remember, for a motion, you want to say, I move that. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and you can take a brief pause the video, and practice. Write down some main motions you may have heard at your previous chapter meeting. Were they clear to you? Or try just writing down motions by saying, I move that we change the colors from gray to blue. And these are just ambiguous examples. But go ahead and pause, practice writing down main motions. Because a lot of people sometimes get up and they just start talking and they want to say, I motion. Well, you haven't moved anything to put anything in motion. So you got to move it before it becomes a motion. So pause right here and practice. Hopefully you took some time to pause the video and practice, made some motions that you may have heard before. An example here, how a motion would hopefully make it from A to B without any problems. I move that the chapter allocate $300 for new member kits. There would be a second, there would be debate, and hopefully a vote. So take a little time to write down motions. Most people come to a meeting and then they want to talk about a motion. Well, if you've reviewed the reports beforehand, if you got them, especially for chapter officers and committees, write your motions before you get there so you know exactly what you're going to say. So you always start with, I move that. Now, if it was that simple, like we would have a motion, we would have a second, the chair would carry it through by repeating it, we would have debate and then a vote, we'd be done and our meetings would be short. But we know sometimes motions need a bit more clarification, so we have to do some things to them. So there's different types of motions. You have subsidiary, incidental, you might hear privilege. So these motions, subsidiary motions, and these are just 3, there's more, but these are the ones you usually may use in a chapter meeting, help refine the business, help make the main motion maybe a little bit more clearer. So the first is the motion to amend. It changes the wording of a motion. So a main motion is on the floor and Sally Mae doesn't really like it. So she may stand up and say, I move to amend the motion by, and there's certain ways you can amend a motion. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little later if you want more information. You can also, let's say you're talking about a main motion and it needs a little bit more work. You can commit or refer that motion to a committee. So either the chair or somebody can stand up and say, I move to refer this motion to committee XYZ. So that then sends an item to a certain committee. They'll do a deeper work. And when information is missing, this is where you use commit or refer. And then the motion to postpone pushes an item to either a later meeting or a little bit later in the meeting, but not indefinitely. So this one, I move to postpone motion XYZ until next month's meeting. That means someone's probably going to do some work, but this one is different than tabling. So postpone puts an item to a later meeting, but not indefinitely. Tabling is for temporary interruptions, not delaying the decision. So let's just say you're having a big discussion and it's really not going through anywhere. Sometimes you got to table the discussion or table the motion because everybody's not really sure. So 3 big things. You can amend, refer, or postpone. So you're just changing the business just a little bit. So I would suggest that you pause right now and practice. Practice, you wrote down your motion. Practice amending that motion. So whatever motion you wrote down, you said, I moved that, we changed the colors from white to purple. Well, amend that motion. And if you want more details on how to amend the motions, I'll have another session for you for that. I suggest writing down, taking that main motion that you took and refer to a committee or even postpone. So this is your chance to go ahead and pause and practice. And you may want to play this video during a meeting or play it during a new member orientation so they can take the time to hear terms. You can explain things to them during the video during our pause and practice times. Now, there's some other types of motions. I don't like to use the term privileged, but I'll use it here for now. There's two that we're going to mention because you'll hear them maybe in your chapter meetings. You hear the term to recess. That means sometimes you need a 10-minute recess to gather to talk about something. And it's just the same thing. You always say, Madam Chair, I move that we recess for 30 minutes. Or I move that we recess for 5 minutes. So it's always, if it's a motion, you always start with I move that. And hopefully you've gotten all your business done and the chair is ready to end the meeting and you can tell the meeting is about to end. Someone can stand and say, I move that we adjourn the meeting at 2:15 p.m. And you vote on the motion. So most of these privileged motions are used when something must be handled immediately. There's other things. There was a privileged motion. Let's say it's too cold in the room. Somebody will say, Madam Chair, I'm going to take a motion of privilege. I move that we change the temperature. You know, it's a little cold. Change temperature, that type of thing. And then we have incidental motions. And these are some people's favorites. And I'm only mentioning 3, but there's more. And I'll talk about these incidental motions in a different session. Most people's favorite is point of order. Point of order, we'll talk about that a little bit later. We also have the appeal, where you can appeal the decision of the chair. And then division of the assembly deals with voting. Each 3 of these motions, you have to use them wisely. You have to make sure you understand why you're using them. And I'll discuss that in a moment. But most people, especially the first one listed here, point of order means something has gone wrong in the meeting. And you say, I need a point of order to put things back the way they should be. Some people stand up and say, point of order, Madam Chair, I don't understand. Well, when you hear the words, I don't understand, you take a teachable moment and tell them, you may want a point of information. So point of information is different than point of order. So point of information allows you as a member to get better understanding of what is happening, especially when you're in debate, what motion is on the floor that you're voting on. So sometimes you need point of information. Now, we've gotten a meeting started. We talked about a little bit about an agenda, a little bit about motions, different types. One of the most important parts of your meeting is the presiding officer. The presiding officer isn't simply in charge. They are the guardian of the process. So your presiding officer, what you should notice, they should stay neutral in debate. If you notice your presiding officer starting to debate, that is definitely a time when you say, point of order, Madam Chair. I didn't think that the presiding officer participated in debate. Another thing about the presiding officer, they enforce time. They make sure that they recognize speakers in a fairly manner. They should state the motion clearly so you know what you're voting on. Ensure the proper voting, whether it's majority, whether it's 2/3, whether we need to do a standing counting vote. They do rule on points of order, and then the presiding officer should maintain decorum. Now, in another session, I will conduct an entire session to tell you the difference, definitely between a presiding officer and the parliamentarian, and how they should interact, each walking in their lane to make sure the business is done with clarity and confidence. So remember, this session is to kind of get you acclimated to what may happen in a chapter meeting that you've never been to before, some terms you may hear, things you may need to pay attention to so that you have a little bit more confidence going from meeting to meeting. Now, every chapter encounters challenges. You've been in this meeting, someone decides to talk out of order, people start talking over each other, emotion might be handled incorrectly, debate gets personal, someone interrupts the chair. In those moments, the rules protect you. You can raise points of order. You can appeal a ruling. You can call for a division. You can request for information. Always ask for clarification. These tools are your shield in a meeting. So just some examples. What happens when things start to go wrong? I mentioned members are talking over each other, and you're sitting there. I usually consider debate kind of like a tennis match. You're watching the ball go back and forth. Well, you're not sure where the ball's going to land. You can stand up and say, Madam Chair, point of order. Those words, point of order, should get the chair's attention to bring the meeting back to order. Now, it happens sometimes. The chair can handle a motion incorrectly. And that is when you should use the appeal the decision of the chair. But remember, to appeal the decision of the chair had to make a decision. It's not something used when you're not happy with the report. It is to be used when the chair, who is standing in front, made a decision. The motion was done incorrectly, and then you can stand and say, I appeal the decision of the chair, and there's a way to handle that. And when we talk about, in another session, presiding officer versus parliamentarian, we'll talk about how to use the appeal the decision of the chair correctly. Now, let's say you took a vote and you're sitting there, well, I'm not sure who actually won. I'm not sure if the yeas have it or the noes. And that means you might think voting seems incorrect. You can stand and say, call for the division of the assembly. So that will make sure we got to redo our vote. So if the vote was everyone who says yes, you're raising your hand, and then they had to be counted, you need to choose a different voting mechanism. Let's say you need clarity before voting. You can request for information, or you just say, point of information, Madam Chair. Before we vote, I need to make sure I am clear of what this motion that is on the floor will actually do. So a quick intentional reflection. I'm going to ask you to pause here and write some responses to this information. Think about the last meeting you attended. What frustrated you? Which rule that we've kind of talked about would have helped? What will you do differently now? It is okay to reflect on a meeting and say, did I really understand that motion? Could I have helped move the business forward a little better by making sure I understood what was happening by asking for my point of information? So take a moment, think about the last meeting you attended, whether it was chapter, a state meeting, regional meeting. What was frustrating to you about the business? What rule that we have talked about could have helped? And what will you do differently now? So take a moment, pause, because I'm going to take a quick pause for a quick drink. Excuse me. And write down some information. And it's good to have a discussion either with the presiding officer or even the parliamentarian to help you be better. Because everybody has a responsibility. Reach one, teach one. If you understand it, you can help another person who may come to a meeting the first time and say, hey, this is how I was taught, and this is how it should actually go. So hopefully from this video, and I'm not even sure it's a whole hour, but it's enough time to hopefully get you acclimated to some different terms that we have talked about. Um, your agenda, motions, we talked about quorum. So I have a challenge. So at your next meeting that you go to, if you watch this video, I challenge you to do one of the following. Make one clear, well-worded motion. That means before the meeting, you reviewed the minutes, you reviewed the agenda, you reviewed the reports. Because the chair will probably ask at the start of a meeting, I would like a motion on the floor to accept the minutes. Well, you can have it written down and you can say, Madam Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as presented. Or Madam Chair, I move that we accept the agenda as presented. So you can be the one, you wrote that down. It is a well-worded motion. I also challenge you to ask one question of procedure. And it's okay in a meeting, especially a chapter meeting, you should have those times for teachable moments, times where you can understand. So you can say, point of information, Madam Chair. And hopefully the chair will take your point of information and hopefully explain it to everyone. I also challenge you to support the chair by following proper debate. And I didn't fully talk about debate here, but in debate, there is some good etiquette, talking for or against and going back and forth, not being personal in a debate, always referring to the chair. So support the chair by following proper debate or respectfully raise a point of order if something doesn't align. So my challenge, make one clear, well-worded motion, ask one question of procedure, support the chair by following proper debate, or respectfully raise a point of order if something doesn't align. Don't do everything. Just do one thing differently. Just do one thing, and you might have a little bit more confidence as you go from meeting to meeting. So here's your confidence affirmation for parliamentary procedure. And this is something I think is important in our finer pearls of governance. You do not need permission to understand parliamentary procedure. It is okay for you to open the book and read cover to cover, especially the little yellow book, which is the best thing to have, called Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. I never expect anyone to read that big 12th edition of Robert's Rules of Order cover to cover. Most people go for the sections they like. But if you want to understand the basics of parliamentary procedure, read that beautiful yellow book from cover to cover, make your notes. You do not need to apologize for asking questions of order. Ask your questions. Questions help you understand, and probably somebody else had the other same question and they didn't want to ask. So ask your questions. You do not need to shrink in meetings because you're unsure of the rules. If you're unsure, raise a point of information. The chair should definitely be willing to say, hey, I hope I can help you understand what is happening. So don't shrink, ask your questions. When you understand the process, you walk into the meeting differently. Now, understanding the process doesn't mean to use it as a weapon against those who don't. If you understand, that means you let the person next to you understand as well. You also listen with intention, you speak with clarity, and you participate with confidence. Parliamentary knowledge is not about control, it's about empowerment. So, this is your confidence affirmation for you to get better at parliamentary knowledge, especially if it's your first meeting and a lot is happening. So, if this session helped you just a little bit, brought you a little bit more clarity, confidence, or even a sigh of relief, I invite you to continue this journey. There's two things. I have a workbook that that goes with this session. Is designed to help you practice, reflect, apply what you've learned. And if you would like it, please send me an email, which will be on the last slide. I say use it, write in it, bring it to your meetings. You can print it, use it virtual. I also offer to chapters and auxiliaries or individuals if you want to prepare for the parliamentary exam. I do offer a live training. We can do it virtual, where for 6 weeks we come together, we do mock sessions, we work through scripts for your meetings, and we kind of walk through the Robert's Rules of Order in brief to help you prepare for the National Association Parliamentary Exam. Now, if that doesn't work for you, I have been releasing for the past 3 Mondays my NAP exam prep podcast where you can do self-study. You can download those videos on YouTube and have them for yourself that you can review the information. I always give quizzes in the information. There's a study guide that you can follow. So that podcast is over there on YouTube at LJB for Phylacter. And you can follow me on all platforms at LJB for Phylacter to get the information. So before I close, thank you for coming to this Phylacter Friday. I just want you to know that the information in this session was not about memorizing rules. It's about giving you a little bit more confidence, clarity, and better control for your meetings. So we talked about making sure parliamentary procedure is not a barrier, but a tool. It protects your voice, it preserves order, and allows chapters to move business from A to B with unity and purpose. All I did was lay a foundation for your meetings. So, understanding motions begin the business language, and they should be clear and done properly. We talked about subsidiary motions, which refine the business. We talked about incidental motions, which protect fairness. We focused on your right as a member, because you have the right to speak, vote, be informed, and a right to appeal if something isn't followed correctly. But you also, remember I mentioned, you have a responsibility to inform yourself. So that means asking the questions. That also means reading the information before you come to the meeting. So I thank you for spending this time on this parliamentary power moment. Your willingness to learn, to grow, and strengthen our governance is what keeps our organization moving forward with excellence. Remember, order creates clarity. Clarity creates confidence, and confidence creates leadership. Remember to always wear your pearls, make sure they are finer, And I will see you next week when we talk about accountability. Have a good one.